Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody.
Hi there.
Today, Emily and I are going to try to answer the question, why is NFP so hard? And this topic came up recently because I was talking to a friend of mine who is single, and I was sharing with her about, the podcast and getting to hear these people's stories and just different topics we've talked about, and how it was a friendly conversation, and I was just bemoaning a little bit, which is silly, right? But bemoaning a little bit sometimes this struggle I feel of like this pull to speak to this topic, and like I feel like I can't escape it or avoid it. I feel so strongly drawn to it, and at the same time, this desire to like not talk about it and just like go my own way. And like, I just want to have friends with people because I feel like it just interrupts relationships that I have sometimes with other women for things that we've talked about already on this podcast. I think we talked about it before. Just like making friendships awkward sometimes, or depending on where everyone is in their journey. So what I was hoping we could do today, Emily, is kind of talk like, why is NFP so hard? And I thought these 3 prongs would maybe give us kind of a way to summarize why this topic is so challenging for Christians. I would say really for Christians, even more so than non-Christians, is physical, emotional, and spiritual. Those 3 categories. Absolutely. So let's start with physical, because we were just talking about this before we started recording the episode. And Emily, if you wanted to share, you can, a little bit of your experience. But what is one of the reasons why NFP is so hard? Because of the physical part of it. And we can say 2 aspects, I think, of the physical part of this. The one physical part of this is actually like engaging in intercourse and timing intercourse, depending on our goals. The other physical part of it is interpreting the female signs, those biomarkers for women to identify their fertile window so that they can match their intercourse timing with whatever objective they're trying to achieve. And so I think let's first start with just like the female biomarker craziness, how that can sometimes really impact our ability to understand what our bodies are doing. So what do you think there, Emily?
Yeah, I think that is one of the beautiful things about NFP is there are so many ways to chart your cycle. We do, as women, have multiple biomarkers that can help us know what our body is doing. So that can be helpful, especially for women that are struggling in one biomarker or the other, to really get a feel of what's going on. It really does seem like, different seasons of life can provide more challenges with tracking your cycle. And so to speak specifically to a postpartum time, there's all kinds of things that can affect what you're seeing with your observations. And I can speak specifically to cervical mucus, but NFP can be so hard because, at different points in your reproductive life, for example, cervical mucus observations can really change. There's such a thing as, continuous mucus. There's also, women can have dry cycles. That just means that they're not seeing mucus on the tissue. Different forms of mucus is easier to monitor than other mucus. And it's not impossible to monitor, for example, continuous mucus, but it does take some time and prudence and diligence to understand what's fertile and what's not. And there's instructions for that and everything. But that can be really challenging. And so I would say I'm thinking of a couple other women throughout the years that I've been involved with helping couples. And I would say that the women that feel like it is really hard, and the experiences that I'm thinking of initially it's women that have a really hard time understanding their cervical mucus observations and what's fertile and what's not. Um, and once again, that really does takes a lot of energy and time with an instructor to get to the bottom of that. And once again, that season of life can change, and someone that hasn't ever experienced that can all of a sudden be thrown into that. For me personally, this postpartum time has been completely different than my previous postpartum time and just my previous menstrual cycles. And so I personally have struggled with continuous mucus. And even as an instructor, it's been super challenging. And now, if I was in regular follow-ups with another instructor looking at my chart and getting a different perspective, I think it would have been way more helpful. And if I had a serious reason to avoid a pregnancy, I definitely would have done that. And I would recommend that to anyone not trying, don't try to manage your own chart by any means. But in this case, I don't have a serious reason to avoid a pregnancy. And so I've continued to make observations, but with a lot of, for lack of a better word, confusion with what my body is doing. And so, I've been nursing this whole time postpartum, and just hormonally, your chart can really be affected by a lot of those things. I know some women's, have dry observations. They don't see mucus on the tissue during a postpartum time. That type of observation is overall easier to monitor when the fertility is coming back for the woman in the couple. So anyway, I think, for me, it can be hard because all of a sudden I was thrown into different observations. And so that can take a lot of energy, especially when you're dealing with little baby. So,
right. There's a lot of things happening at the same time. Yeah. And what were you saying is one of the kind of the culprits of seeing more of a continuous mucus pattern postpartum?
Yeah. So it's not unlikely for cervical cells to get transferred to the vaginal canal during a vaginal birth. And so my understanding is whenever a woman experiences multiple, meaning 2 or more vaginal births, it's possible for those cells to transfer outside the cervix. And so that's what we call an ectropion. And that can be addressed and treated by a physician, but that can also produce cervical mucus at different points in a postpartum time or within the woman's cycle. That can make the observations a little bit more confusing because perhaps the mucus could look what we would call peak type, or it can have other characteristics. But a lot of times that can be something that women struggle with postpartum after multiple births. So that can really pose a hardship for tracking the cycle.
Yeah.
The challenge,
Right.
yeah.
But there are medical solutions, but there's a solution, you
Yes.
can seek out treatment. I'm going to go ahead and link in the show notes once again for people, the My Catholic Doctor
Oh,
website,
yeah, good idea.
because it's just a great resource. Again, you don't have to be Catholic to access any of those doctors, but there's just doctors on there. They take insurances that they can meet with you. So if you are in an area that is in a dearth of resources, that is an option. It's almost like I heard a friend of mine explain it as kind of like an online hospital. And so it's just got a great conglomeration of physicians that are knowledgeable in these biomarkers and helping to interpret and helping to address and kind of find a solution. So yeah. So while it's definitely a challenge, it's not impossible. But of course we'd always, I'd love for it to just be really easy. all the time.
Right.
And I think that, the reality of the challenge of the interpretation of biomarkers, the physical challenge that presents, I think it is connected to the physical challenge of making choices on when you engage in the marital act, right? Because if you're having a hard time knowing when you're fertile or infertile and you're trying to achieve or avoid, right, whatever that is, like that makes it challenging. Now, for the other population of people that are just like, meh, whatever, like we don't really care. We're just going to have intercourse, get pregnant, we don't get pregnant, we don't get pregnant. Like then it doesn't really matter in, as far as family planning goes. I would still argue like it's good for your health. It's good to know what's happening with your cycle, right? Like biomarker
Absolutely.
knowledge is just great in that regard.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but it's kind of like for you, Emily, right? Like if you're seeing this continuous mucus, like, but you and Josh kind of don't really care if you get pregnant again. So are
Right.
you really going to seek the medical treatment to like get rid of the mucus? Like, nah,
Exactly.
it's not going to kill me. It's not going
Exactly.
to, right now anyway, it doesn't seem like it's going to hinder me from trying to achieve if that happens. So
Right.
I just don't really care. And so I think that's also important, is kind of to assess where you're at. And so if you're in the camp of more like, no, I really need to know what my biomarkers are telling me because I really want to avoid, achieve, whatever it is, well, then, you're going to want to find those solutions to address those physicals. And then you and your spouse are going to have to really have, those conversations about when you're able to engage in intercourse and when you're not, and assessing the potential for chances of potentially achieving versus avoiding a pregnancy. I do want to also put out there too, there are options, and I don't remember the Creighton Models policy, Emily. I think they're for this, but I don't know if other doctors are offering it too, but there is that post-peak progesterone draw that you can
Yes.
get.
Yes.
And that's a blood test that you can get, and it will confirm ovulations taking place based on the level of progesterone. So that's another thing. If you're seeing a lot of mucus or whatever it is, that might be a potential option too.
That's a great option and suggestion for sure.
To give, couples more days that they can potentially engage in intercourse, because, maximizing that I think is really important, right, for healthy marriage, depending on the couple's needs and desires. And, I know many couples who male and female have very strong desires for intimacy. And so their marriage does a lot better the more that they can engage in that. Whereas I know other couples who obviously they still enjoy that, but they don't feel like their relationship is as hindered or their closeness is as hindered if they're having to avoid a little bit more.
Right.
So it really is like very situational and circumstantial. It's not just like kind of a one size fits all. So the physical ability to identify biomarkers, again, yet another push, I would say, Emily, right? For like learning this as early as possible.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like knowing your body, women knowing your body, and men knowing how your body works in complementary to her body and how they work together, because her body really tells the story of how you orient your sexual desire. I think that's an aspect of the complementarity of in the conversation that we miss, is how, in isolation, our bodies don't make too much sense. But when we read them together, it's like 2 pages in a book, right? If you're just reading one side of the story, well, what happens next? It's like I have to read them both alongside each other for it to be a complete picture. And so I think this just segues perfectly actually into the emotional part of this, right? Like,
yes,
where am I coming to this whole thing from? I'll try it as best as I can. And Emily, chime in, like, thinking of the different people, right, where we're at in our journey here. And maybe we're coming at it of, we both entered into marriage totally on the same page, understanding what our sexual desire is. We're trying to live out chastity, trying to love each other and not see each other as objects to use. And so when it comes to avoiding intercourse or trying to achieve a pregnancy, like we are emotionally still able to connect and share how we're feeling, right? Like not having intercourse right now is really hard for me. Like to be able to just say that to my spouse, I think that is so powerful.
Definitely.
I would say that when I was working with couples, I used to really, I tried to encourage that a lot, and maybe biasly, like specifically saying that to the husband to say like, you have a right, like assuming, right, that he most likely has a higher sexual drive than she does. like, you have a right to say like, wow, this is really hard. Like, this is new for me, especially if they were in that conversion camp of like, they used to use birth control. They came from the mindset of sex on demand, even in marriage. Like, I should just be able now, especially in marriage, actually, right?
Right.
Like Christian, I think
Yes.
Landon talked about that when they were sharing his story about how like, oh, well, now I'm married. So all bets are off. It's just open reign, you know? And so coming from that mindset to, oh no, like chastity, like this is a desire I have to orient towards the good of the other and for the greater glory of God. It's almost like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I'll do that with my other desires, but I don't really want to do that with this desire. Like, this stinks. This is hard. And I think just being frank and saying that, like,
Don't you think I've often thought of this just coming from, for couples that have abstained until marriage. So I remember Josh and I doing our marriage prep and with a sponsor couple. Oh, God bless them. They were wonderful. And, um, the question comes up like, how often are you expecting to have sexual intercourse?
mm,
And it's just so funny to hear both perspectives.
yes.
And so coming
What
from
a great question, though, to talk about.
it's a great question. And
Yeah.
um so having that conversation because, especially for a couple that's, cultivating chastity during that
Right.
time, maybe the ideas between each person are totally different.
Right.
And so that takes a lot of conversation and
Yes.
talking
Well,
it through.
I think it's such a great interview question when you're dating people. Like
Mhm.
when you're dating, if you're getting close to that, like, yeah, I'm thinking this might be the person, asking such a question in a kind of just an open, honest dialogue way, and then really listening to the answer, I think would be really kind of life-changing because is
Mhm.
it an approach to sex where it's, well, yeah, sure, I'd be okay with us not being able to have sex, but you could still like we could have, there could be masturbation, there could be
Right,
oral sex, like there'd be
right,
these other things that we could do. And
right,
so, I'm saying from his perspective, right?
right.
Like from his perspective, it's like, oh, well, I could still have that climactic experience, with you in the room, but without you physically. And it's like, okay, that is all about you. And
Right.
that's actually like, I don't think you're intending it to be this way, but that is selfish. Like that's using our desire, our sexual gift in a selfish way.
It's
And I think
disorder.
it is disordered, right, Emily? Yeah. And I think women, especially in maybe a marital context, would see that as being them being still generous.
Right.
And
Yeah.
sadly from like a place of guilt, like, oh, well, it's
Yes.
my body is the reason we can't have sex. And
Yes.
so, because I still love you, I'll do these other things with you so that you can experience this climactic experience. Or even I could experience this climactic experience, right? Without penetration, ejaculation, without those things. And it's like, no, guys, that's not, and by guys, I mean me, us. Like,
Right.
no, like that's not that full, rich experience of what that act is intended for.
I
It's
would venture
disordered.
yeah, I would venture to say even couples that are contracepting, I think I I get the feeling that on days where the woman is menstruating, and as we know, taking oral contraceptives, the woman is not actually having a healthy menstrual period, but a withdrawal bleed, in essence. And so I get the feeling that even on those days, regardless of what the couple is doing, that mindset can creep in. And
Absolutely.
that yeah, that's something that really needs to be reordered.
And
Mhm.
I think it's almost like if you watch a movie and you mute it. I feel like muting sometimes can really give us a deeper insight into what's happening. And I think, in those situations, if we were to just mute it, right, and we just kind of assessed what was happening, I think more easily people would be able to see, we could see with the eyes of our heart to say, this is not right. Whereas if
Absolutely.
we saw a different picture, right? Where it's the couple's trying to avoid, she's in her fertile window, maybe she's on her menstrual period. And so they don't want to, engage in intercourse during that time. And so they both, out of respect for one another, one another's dignity, they say, okay, I'm not an animal, right? I'm going to take this feeling that I have to connect with you physically, and I'm going to channel it towards something else that we can do to physically connect, right? And this is
Right.
where it goes back to an episode that we did about arousing versus affirming touch, knowing each other's love languages, how else we can connect, knowing that this too will pass, right? Like this time of fertility does pass, and we'll be able to reconnect physically at another time. Like just muting those two scenarios, I think you could just see, one speaks more profoundly of a deep love for the other. You know, I just it's not heroic for you to deny doing something that you have no desire to do. There's
Right.
no heroism in that. What's heroic is in knowing, and as a spouse, right, we can speak to this and you can feel it in marriage, right? Like by God's grace, when you know your spouse is attracted to you and wants to be intimate with you, and yet you know that for whatever reason, right, whatever the circumstance is, that's not going to happen right now or today. But they don't push you away. They don't act in kind of anger or frustration, even disappointment. And this is where I give, in my marriage anyway, all of the credit to Joey. Like he is just so much more a saint than I am, because he can respond in such joy at his sacrifice, whereas I often respond in complaining to my sacrifice. So but it's so beautiful.
That's
It's just
beautiful. Yeah.
so beautiful. You know,
Mhm.
it's like Christ on the cross as he was walking to Calvary with the cross covered in blood and just his body completely destroyed from the scourging and so much pain. You know, he didn't carry the cross and kind of point fingers at everyone. Well, it's because of you. I'm doing this because of you. You see, you bad people. I'm making this sacrifice because of you. It was, look, I'm making all things new.
Right.
You know, Emily, like a joy in the sacrifice, how
Yes.
enriching that is to our marriages.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so I think there's that aspect of the emotional part, right? So it's having the conversations, it's sharing our real feelings with one another without feeling burdened by our bodies or making the other person feel bad. And then the other aspect I think of the emotional part, Emily, is healing of wounds.
Yes.
You know, healing of wounds. You know, why is this so hard for me? You know,
Yeah.
why is this so hard for me? Whatever the hard is, you know, is the hard
Right.
abstaining, is the hard achieving, being open to life, is the hard, you know, the frequency of intercourse because I had these different expectations, is the hard just, yeah, this radical shift in my thinking from abstinence, if I'm in a Christian worldview, right, from abstinence outside of marriage to, well, no, just kind of sex whenever in marriage versus chastity. You know, where am I at there, and what wounds do I have from my past that I need healing from childhood, from previous relationships, from pornography, you know,
Right.
from whatever it is, the lies of the culture. How have I been wounded, and how is that affecting my marriage emotionally?
Yeah. I think that by practicing a natural method, knowing your body, knowing your cycle, because that cultivates a conversation, just a regular conversation, a constant conversation about your fertility as a couple, what the woman is seeing. You're constantly talking about it. Um, and I think because of that, that just opens that line of communication for so many other things about this part of the marriage. And so, for someone that's practicing a natural method, I would hope that it's not as challenging to have those conversations, perhaps about previous wounds, or to go deeper with why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling, because they're already in the habit of talking about these other things that can be uncomfortable for couples that haven't previously talked about them.
Right.
So I think it's a natural kind of segue into deeper communication about this intimate part of the marriage.
Right. Absolutely. I think just being gentle with ourselves, you know, again, depending on where you're at, you know, and this is maybe for the person who's like, this is a brand new worldview. Like, this is a brand new way of thinking about sex and marriage and my relationship with my spouse. And kind of like, you know, how do you eat an elephant like one bite at a time? Like, okay, where do I go from here? You know, and I think the emotional part of it, I think, is a really big piece of finding healing, kind of like assessing those previously held beliefs. Like, and how do I view sex? Like, how do I view sex? Do I view it as a chore? Is it something I have to do because it's how I'm going to keep my spouse faithful to me or liking me? Is there fear attached there? Is sex all about pleasure? And like, I just want to, climax as much as possible, as often as possible. Is sex a gift to the other? Like, is this an experience that I want to have with the person? Like that these two, like he and I, or she and I, this is like for both of us to
Right.
come together. And so yeah, I think there's just a lot of opportunity no matter where we are in our journey, right? Even if you're like, for you and I, right, Emily, like
Yeah.
still opportunities to grow and to heal. Yeah. Always needing healing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
The seasons of life, it's so different. Sometimes you feel more connected to your spouse than other times, and for tons of different reasons. And
absolutely.
so you just really have to just, go with it for
Right.
lack of a better term. Just like, just know that everything is temporary. All you have to do is try. And if something is not working, whether in regards to like a method,
Mhm.
I know we've said this before, like keep seeking and keep searching for a method that will work for you, because I do believe that there is a method for every couple.
Absolutely. And I think this aspect of the emotional really can play into my perception of whether or not a method is working for me. Well, this method isn't working for me because I have to abstain more than I want to abstain. It's like, that doesn't
Yes.
mean the method's not working. That just might be there was a huge disconnect between your idea of sexual frequency and like what reality is based on how the human body actually works.
Yes.
That's not you can kind of go into all the methods and there's still biologically nothing's going to change, right? Each method is just a way to identify biomarkers, track them, and interpret them. It doesn't say, oh, well, in this biomarker, you don't have a fertile window, but with this, in this method, you don't have a fertile window, or in this method, you do have a fertile window. Some of them do measure them differently. So it might be, that might also help, I guess, a switch in method. But just to kind of keep that in mind, it's like sometimes
Yes.
it's not always the method that's being used. Sometimes it's me, the user, right? It's me, the user. And I think that ties
Absolutely.
into that third part I wanted to bring in is, why is NFP so hard? And that spiritual component. Like, I am a sinner and my heart is far from God and I'm not like Christ and I want to be more like Christ. And that takes a lot of change, and it takes God's grace. And most importantly, it takes prayer, right? Because prayer isn't me asking God for what I want and me getting my way. Prayer is me opening my heart to God so that He can bring about His will and bring me along to almost in a more cooperative way. It's complementary, but it's also cooperative. Like, Lord, I want to desire your will, and here's where I'm at. Like, I can honestly lay it out on the line with God and say, and this is what I perceive, right? This is how I perceive where I'm at. And if something is off, like, please just help, like, let's work on course correcting here, and to pray just honestly. Like, He will bring it all into the light, and He will bring the resources into your life, and He will do all those things because that's what He wants. He wants true love and life in your marriage. And so if we're open to that healing, I mean, that's just been my experience. It's like God is a God who wants us to be restored. And if we feel like we're lost and we don't know what to do, like, He always shows up. Always.
Absolutely. He wants to redeem things, right? Like, and whether that gets redeemed in this world or the next, like all of our wounds need redeeming. I was just going to talk more. I know we've said this before, but the marital act is such a means for grace for the marriage. But for example, for couples that maybe there are wounds that are just really inhibiting the couple from even coming together in the marital act. And, you know, obviously we're not medical professionals here. So, I know that there is help and healing for that through in what I would think would be, some sort of counseling therapy situation, but, or, with your pastor, for example, maybe that might be necessary, but just trying to get to that place where you can unite in that way in your marriage, because it is such a means for grace. um, that's how the Lord pours into you as a couple, is through that marital act, and, joins you in that. And so, obviously he pours into us in all other forms too within our marriage, but that's such a sacred, special, intimate act with him. And so for couples that might be struggling to even get to that point or feel comfortable with their spouse due to some sort of wound, just as long as both the man and the woman are on board, just keep trying to open that door. But that might take, meeting with someone outside the marriage to get another perspective or to get help.
Right. Good point, Emily. And I'll link to the John Paul II Healing Center. They have a lot of great, I think, like healing retreats and events, and they have live events. They have online events. I've had friends talk about them very positively. I haven't done anything with them, but I would really love to do that.
I've
So
heard
I
about
need,
them, but yeah, I haven't either. And I've heard great things as well.
right. So I'll add that. And then I need to make a point to look on and try to get signed up for something too. But anyway, so that's I think that's the, so the spiritual aspect is like, where is my heart? Am I just totally closed off to like, you know what, this is just too much, Lord? Kind of like, who can do it? I don't want to do this. And we can be on a spectrum, I think, in all three of these areas: physical, emotional, spiritual. Some of the areas are going to be harder than others. But of course, if I can bring the more aligned my heart can be with God's will and God's way, the more peace I'm going to experience, right? The healthier I'm going to be physically, the healthier I'm going to be emotionally. Because the biggest lie that Satan tells us, right, is that God does not want our good,
Right.
that God's in competition with us, that God is not our father, that he doesn't care for us, that he doesn't want, beautiful, life-giving love in our marriage. And we know that's a flat out lie. That is not true. Not who God is. Go ahead, Emily.
One thing we didn't talk about is why NFP. There is another reason NFP can be so hard, and it can be because not both parties are not on board. And I've been there. I wish I had better suggestion. I always default to recommending prayer and fasting for any intentions, but that is a really hard spot to be. And yeah, I feel for any couples that are there, especially if, someone is really feeling drawn to try to practice that, and they know that it's, um, that their spouse is not going to be on board. So,
right. Yeah, for sure. That is definitely hard.
do you
Yep.
have any resource? I mean, I just
Oh.
really wish I could give more suggestions for that, because I know I think that's really common.
And I think this is a sad state. I have a lot of different thoughts on that. One of my first thoughts is like, this is where when priests, with a good intention, but don't take the seriousness of cohabitation and premarital sex very seriously before they say that you will witness to their marriage, you are not doing them any favors. You are not doing them any favors, because then they get into marriage and say one of them starts to have a conversion. They're not equally yoked in an area that is very prominent in their marriage. And I think that is a huge disservice to the couple. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see some of these situations happening, Emily, to be honest with you, is I feel like it's a watering down of the preparation of this vocation and the meaning of the vocation and what it demands on the outset, and not giving couples the opportunity to walk away from it. Like, here's the truth. That's what Christ is so wonderfully gentle and loving in that he lays out the truth and leaves the door open. If you would like to leave, he doesn't want to see you leave, you're welcome to. And then if you want to come back at any point in time, you are totally welcome to come back. But this is not changing. This is the truth. And I think that is one of the biggest disservices. And so then when you have couples in this situation, I mean, I would obviously say, like, for whoever is discerning to move in the direction of NFP, prayer and God and a community that supports you in that decision is going to be your rock, because it's going to be really hard at home on the home front, right? Like you
Yes.
are butting heads on this. And as Christ tells us, we don't want to unnecessarily cause discord in our marriage or discourse, but we also don't run away from it, And so if this is causing some type of tension, we don't water down the truth or back away from it. We say like, okay, sweetheart, I love you. And this is, I firmly believe this, and I can't step away from that. I can't fall away from what I believe, and trying to work towards, unity as best as we can in those areas. And so while all of what I have said so far, I don't take anything back. And it's true. I believe God wants the good things for our marriages and wants us to be these witnesses in the world. That's why we have the institution of marriage, and the sacrament of marriage is to be the light of Christ in the world. We also can't water it down, though, and can't deny that there's a cross involved in our vocation, just like there is in every aspect of just as there is in every vocation, there is a cross. And marriage is not going to be the perfect ideal thing this side of heaven, but we can strive to make it as best we can. And it's often used as a means of healing and restoration, hopefully for the couple together, and if not, for the individuals in the marriage. We have lives of the saints that tell us this, right, Emily? Like, not every married couple was on the same page, and there was some unhealthy situations. But God was still there, and we're still called to live out the truth.
I agree. Yes.
So, okay, we will link the resources that we talked about today in the show notes, and reach out. Let us know if you have any questions or comments. Also, I wanted to just put it out there. If any of you have, a story that, well, we all have a story, right? Like Emily and I would love to hear your story. If you feel interested or called to share your story and what God's done in your life, especially in this area of family planning, of chastity, of just renewal and restoration and sexuality, like we'd love to have you on. We'd love to hear more about your story. So feel free to email us, the nfpshow@gmail.com, so we can connect with you. That would be great. I think that's all I have for today.
Yeah.
Anything else, Emily?
No, this was great. It was great to see you.
Okay. Awesome. You too, of course. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you in the next episode.
Okay.
Bye, Emily.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.